Uh, hold on. Yeah. Okay. Still want it on nicer. Less. I need a good place to read. Okay. 50%. Uh, Please don't tell me that's that little boy. I swear to God. That's him climbing upstairs. I don't understand how he saw me come up the stairs when he was in the other room. I swear. I wouldn't say I hate little kids, but still. I have no idea. He just started crying. I'm just like, dang, I can't send anything. That's tough. Well, I might as well start reading then. One person joins the other. Oh God. No, 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 no. Okay, no. Mama, I am trying to read. Aloud at least. You see See, I just wish someone would come here so I can ask, hey, can anyone hear me? What does this even do? Uh, anyway, I don't know if anyone's watching on. So I'm just gonna start reading and see how it goes from there. No one's replying on Kick. I got a like, but that's about it. Oh God, man, like, oh, so she heard that. How very, very far we've come. The ceiling was high enough that he had to crank his neck to see. Pillars of marble stood all around, and the floor was a fine mosaic. No, it's not. Mosaic of different kinds of stones fitted together. Yu-Gi-Oh could scarce Yu-Gi-Oh could scarcely breathe upon his first glance of the grand inferior of the Aximon Church's central cathedral. Until 2 years ago, his life, as far as he knew it, was to be vainly swinging an axe into a tree that would never fall down. His only sentiment was to be reflect on the memories of his long lost, golden-haired friend. He had led a lonely life. Oh my God, this is horrible. Okay, calm down. His only sentiment would be to reflect on the memories of his long lost, golden haired friend as he led a lonely life without marriage or children, dwelling deep in dwelling deep in the forest until the day he grew old and handed the axe to a new generation and passed away with no one to tell his tale. It was the sudden arrival one day of a black haired young man that had broken Yu-Gi-Oh's tiny, suffocating world by force, using methods the previous cravers, the previous carvers could have never imagined. He had cut down the absolute barrier blocking the way to the big city and confronted Yu-Gi-Oh with a major decision. Stay here in his tiny home, nursing his memories of Alice, or set out on a massive journey to get her back. It would be a lie to claim that he had never given it a second thought. When Chief, oh my God, can I just call this dude an old man? When Chief Old Man asked him what he wanted for his next calling to be on the night of the village festival, he had first considered his family. Up to that point, Yu-Gi-Oh had given his family his entire salary as a as the Giga Caesar carver. They were traditionally a barely farming family, but their fields were small. In a recent run of pure. Why can't I read? Read! Oh my fucking God, read! You can read in your head, but you can't read aloud. This is freaking horrible. They were traditionally a barely farming family, but their fields were small, and a recent run of poor harvests had left them little income. Yu-Gi-Oh's steady monthly wages were a minor bedrock that he knew his parents and brothers relied upon, even if no one wanted to admit it. Once the Giga Caesar was fallen, that salary. Oh, I hate my life. I hate my life, film. Why? Why? I hate my life. Once the Giga Caesar was fallen, that salary was gone. Naturally, But if he chose to be a farmer like his father, they would receive pre preferential choice of the large, sunny stretches ready to be tilted to the south. Standing at the pulpit amid the excited villagers, Yugio looked into the hopeful and anxious faces of his family members. Low battery, 10%. Okay. His hesitation had only lasted an instant. On one end of the scale was a reunion with his childhood friend. On the other was the livelihood of his family. The scale tilted, and Yugio announced that he would leave the village to become a swordsman. Even as a swordsman, he could choose to stay in rule it and be one of the men at arms, assuring he'd still have a salary, but leaving the village meant leaving his family. The money that Yugio made and the possibility of new fertile fields would all go up in smoke. He hastily left the day after the festival because he couldn't stand seeing the suppressed disappointment and unhappiness in the faces of his parents and brothers. Low battery. Okay, they had there had been more opportunities to choose a life that supported his family after he and Kirito left Rulid. They competed in the sword fighting tournament in Sakaria and won the right to join the Grayson there. After hard training, they were given a recommendation to North Centauria Imperial Swordcraft Academy, but the commander also offered to keep them around, with the promise of promotions and maybe even a future place as the Grayson commander. If he accepted that steady salary in Zakaria and had sent some of it back to Rulid on the regular trading caravel, it would have made things so much easier for his family. And yet, Yugio had turned down the commander's offer and accepted the letter of recommendation instead. Along the way to Centauria, and even after joining the academy, a part of Yugio's mind had been busy making excuses. He had been named school representative. He'd be named school representative when the four empire oh god when the four empire unification tournament and the and received the and I'm not gonna try and pronounce that and received the rank of integrity knight. And then his parents would have riches and comfort beyond their imagination. When he made his triumph return with Alice, riding a dragon and outfitted in silver armor, his parents would be prouder of their younger son than anyone could have been. Anyone could have been. Anyone could have been. But 2 nights ago, when he had drawn his blade against Rios and Hun, against Mr. Ketchup and Mr. Mustard, Yuchio had betrayed his family for the third time. He gave up on the very real possibility of noble rank in his future and chose to violate the taboo index, sacrificing his common status in the process. Even his overwhelming rage drove his actions. A part of Yugio had understand that if he attacked, he would lose anything. Oh my. He would lose everything. How can I improve my reading? I read perfectly in my head. And yet, this is this is when they fight the Crimson Knight. Like this is when they fight Mr. Fire Knight. I call him the Crimson Knight. And the R word's about to come here in a little bit. And yet, still he made the choice to go ahead. He could say it was to uphold his personal sense of justice and save Tisei and Roni. Yeah, Mr. Fireman, Mr. Crimson Knight, however you call it. He could say it was to uphold his personal sense of justice and save Tisei and Roni from being raped, but that wasn't all of it. He wanted to unleash the raging thirst to kill, to erase all traces of Mr. Ketchup and Mr. Mustard from the world. This was, yeah, it's confirmed. That is confirmed. Her outfit matches his completely. There was a pit of black desire in his heart. How how very, very far he had come. From one of the 12 elite students at the academy to a traitor against Simon Church. And now there he was, stepping on the most hallowed ground in the entire world. After escaping after escaping from the Archer Knight and winding up in a vast, ginormous library, the little girl who had claimed to be the previous pontifex of the church showed him books full of the world's history, which he practically devoured. He had a pressing question to answer. How many people, in the long arc of history, had ever defied the church, fought the Integrity Knights, achieved their desires, and safely escaped? Sadly, he didn't find a single answer to such a thing in the historical record. The glory of the church immutated the world, and all people bowed before the mighty, and all people bowed before the mighty Integrity Knights. These things easily solved even the gravest of troubles. The uh, Emperor border squabbles, for example. No matter how far he dug into the thick history tumult, he found no in, he found no instances in, insist in in Yujio kill me instances of anyone attacking the church and fighting the knights. Okay, we're at 8%. That means that means in the eight and the three 800 and the 380 years of history, ever since Stacia created the world, I am the most sinful person who has ever lived. He had a freezing chill assault him as he closed the book. If Kirito had returned at that very moment, he might have fallen to the ground and curled up into a ball. Even as the mysterious little former pontifex explained the ways of the world to them, Yujiro couldn't help but grapple with himself. He'd abandoned his family, attacked another person, and chosen to fight the church. He could never go back to his old life. The only way was forward, bloodied hands, soiled soul, and all. There was just one goal ahead for him. He had to retrieve the heart fragment stolen by the pontifex, turn Alice Synthesis 30 back into Alex Zubag, and take her home to Ruled Village. But his hope for actually living with her was probably gone by now. There was no place he could live after his many sins anymore, except for the horrifying dark territory beyond the End Mountains. But even that was a price worth paying if it meant Alice could go back home and live in happiness again. Yujiro watched Kirito walk before him, turning over this secret determination in his head. If I said I was going to the dark territory, would you come with me? He stopped himself before he could imagine his partner's answer. The black-haired male was the only person in the entire world standing in this position with him. The idea that they might travel separate paths in the not-too-distant future was too frightening to ponder. As Cardinal warned, the hallway from the stairway was surprisingly short. He rarely had time to get lost in his thoughts before they arrived at a spacious rectangular room. In the center of the right-hand wall was a surprisingly large staircase leading upward. The ceiling was about 8 miles above, so there was a good 20 steps before the stairs stopped at a landing. On the left hand wall was a set of large double doors surrounded by statues of winged beasts. Kirito flung out his hand and pressed against the wall. So Yujiro followed his lead and backed against a nearby pillar. They held their breath and listened intently for any presence in the dim chamber. If the former Pontifex was correct, these doors on the left would lead to the armory. For being so important, however, the chamber was silent and appeared empty. Even the light of solace coming down from the stairs on the right seemed chilly and gray. "Looks like no one's here," he whispered to Kirito, who seemed a bit surprised. "It's an armory, so you'd figure there'd at least be a soldier or two on guard. But I guess no one's going to sneak into the Examon church to steal weapons anyway. Still, they know we're here, right? They don't seem too concerned." "They probably aren't. They figure they don't need to bother searching for us. So the next time we run across an Integrity Knight, it'd either be a bunch of them or a really tough individual. Let's make the most of our leeway then," Kirito said, finishing with a snort. Snort. Uh, he darted out from the shadow of the wall, and Yujiro followed him across the empty room. The doors of the armory, carved with reliefs of the goddess Solace and Terraria, were so imposing and stately that even without a keyhole, it seemed to suggest that they would not open to anyone who wasn't pure of fate. Kirito put an ear to one of the doors and yanked the handles. They opened with almost disappointing ease. There wasn't even the squeak of a hinge. The dark space beyond the 50 the dark space beyond the 50-cent opening. Uh, oh, 5%. Okay, I better be going downstairs now, but I'll try reading a little bit more. The dark space beyond the 50-cent opening. 50-cent opening excluded the chill of centuries of silence. Yujiro shivered and had to hurry to seize through after Kirito opened without a care. The door swung heavily shut behind them, leaving them in perfect darkness. "System Cole." Their voices spoke in perfect unison, and in spite of the dead serious situation, Yujiro couldn't help but smile. The rest of the command was "Generate Luminous Element," which reminded Yujiro of the time they had gone to find Selka in the northern cage 2 years ago. At the time, even the simplest of beginning sacred arts was unbelievably hard to execute, and they could only weakly light the end of a stick. "Food's ready?"
Yes.
A source of pure white light appeared above his palm, driving away the thick darkness of Yujiro's wistful recollection along with it. "Whoa," Kirito muttered. What? What? Muttered. "You see, I'm going downstairs now. I'll continue this later." Oh God.